Okay, so today we're doing a deep dive into this really interesting conversation. Happened on YouTube between two people.
Yeah, and our mission really is to pull out the key stuff. They covered a lot: media changes, science, health challenges.
Right. And, public health, personal agency, what we can actually do.
Exactly. And it wasn't like a lecture, more of a real back and forth, a genuine exchange.
Very conversational. So for you listening, maybe you know this stuff inside out. Maybe you're just curious.
Doesn't matter. We're going to break it down, make it clear.
Okay, let's jump in. First up, the media landscape. How it's, shifting. What did they say?
The big one was the move away from, legacy media, TV networks, big newspapers.
Towards online stuff. YouTube was mentioned specifically.
Yeah. And a huge driver, they argued, was the cost. Digital bandwidth is basically, well, almost free now.
Right, which lowers the bar for anyone to make content, I guess.
Totally. And one of the speakers, he felt he saw a real change in legacy media. When was it? Around 2012.
Yeah, he mentioned that. What was the feeling? What changed for him?
A sense that maybe the independence, the integrity wasn't quite there in the same way.
And do they have ideas why?
Well, one thing that came up strongly was advertising, specifically pharmaceutical ads.
Oh, right. They threw out some big numbers, didn't they?
Huge, like 50% of ad budgets for the big networks, maybe even 75% for news associations coming from pharma.
Wow. And the implication there is?
Well, the potential implication is, if you're relying that heavily on one industry for cash.
Does it skew the reporting? Especially on health.
That's the concern. Consciously or not, does it create a bias? Which, kind of explains why people might look elsewhere online.
Makes sense. They also talked about hyperconnectivity. What's that about?
It's just how incredibly connected everything is now online. Information spreads like wildfire.
Good information, hopefully.
Yeah, good information can spread fast, but so can, let's say, less helpful ideas.
Yeah.
Or, as they put it, maybe even pathological ones.
Right. Things can go viral for the wrong reasons. Yeah.
Exactly. A catchy, wrong headline travels faster than a nuanced truth sometimes.
Okay. So that's the media backdrop. Then they shifted focus to challenges within, like science and health communities.
Yeah, one speaker had a very traditional medical background, hard science.
But he saw a disconnect.
He did. He realized patients often weren't actually doing the preventative stuff. The basic health measures weren't landing.
Despite all the science.
Right. So that's what pushed him towards media, to try and get that information out differently. More effectively, maybe.
And his family wasn't thrilled initially. His father, also a doctor.
Yeah, his dad was apparently quite disapproving at first. Probably saw it as, leaving the serious path of research and practice.
Understandable. They gave some specific examples of bumping up against the system, right? Arsenic in apple juice.
Oh, yeah. That was a big one. Highlighted a few things. One, a lack of transparency from authorities initially.
Yeah.
Not wanting to share the data.
And the media wasn't helpful either.
Apparently quite negative towards those raising the issue. It took public pressure, really, to get regulations changed.
So a battle fought behind the scenes, kind of.
A lot of these things are. The GMO labeling fight was similar.
What was the core issue there? Just wanting to know what's in your food?
Pretty much. The transparency argument. Other countries label GMOs. Why not the U.S.?
And the pushback.
Intense. Personal attacks, apparently.
Yeah.
Just for asking for labeling.
Yeah.
It shows how tough it can be to challenge powerful interests.
Yeah, they mentioned a letter sent to the speaker's university dean from peers.
Right. That sounded quite coordinated. An attempt to get him fired, basically.
Yeah.
Leaked to the press even before the dean saw it.
Wow,
Yeah.
that really speaks to the pressure trying to silence dissent within academia itself.
Exactly. Even with tenure, which is supposed to protect that kind of thing.
And then, of course, COVID-19. That seemed to amplify a lot of these issues.
Massively. It became a sort of case study in the difficulty of having open scientific debate during a crisis.
What specific examples did they focus on?
Well, the hydroxychloroquine discussion. The feeling that it was shut down, prescriptions banned, maybe without enough study.
And the focus seemed very heavily on just vaccines.
That was the perception discussed, yeah. A kind of tunnel vision. And then school closures.
Huge debate there.
And very different approaches in different places, right? But questioning the consensus view often brought really intense reactions.
They even mentioned Nobel laureates getting canceled.
Yeah, domain experts, people with serious credentials being silenced or dismissed for offering different perspectives.
What's the danger there when you silence experts?
Well, you lose potentially valuable insights, right? It hinders problem solving. It suggests the correct answer is already decided, rather than being open to inquiry. It's worrying for science.
And the NIH came up again, the National Institutes of Health, underfunding preventative health.
Yeah, the point was made that maybe there's less focus on prevention because, well, there's less profit in it compared to treating diseases after they happen.
Interesting perspective. Prevention doesn't sell drugs, basically.
That seemed to be the underlying suggestion, which led to this idea of tilling the soil for health.
What does that mean, tilling the soil?
It's an analogy for doing the foundational work. Good nutrition, lifestyle, supportive environment, building resilience before illness strikes.
Instead of just waiting to treat the symptoms.
Exactly. And the point was made that maybe some policies in the U.S. actually make it harder for people to, till that soil effectively.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the connections, the media shifts, the science challenges. They all seem to feed into this idea of make America healthy again.
That's how they framed it. These aren't separate issues. The new media allows people to question things, and the perceived problems in traditional systems fuel that questioning, especially around health.
So this Make America Healthy Again movement, what's the core aim?
Primarily tackling the chronic disease epidemic. It's huge. The cost is enormous, both financially and in human terms.
And the speaker involved has worked on this stuff for a long time.
Yeah, decades. So he seemed quite positive that this is becoming a more central conversation.
They made an interesting point about prevention versus cures and getting credit.
Right. It's much easier to celebrate a cure, isn't it? Like the first heart transplant, immediate fame, clear result.
Whereas preventing something, it's the absence of an event. Harder to see, harder to give credit for.
Exactly. So maybe we don't incentivize prevention enough. It just doesn't get the same attention or funding.
Which brings us back to government bodies like the NIH. The feeling was they could do more.
Yeah, a sense of disappointment. That they should be prioritizing prevention more, listening more to the public's needs, maybe being more transparent about funding.
And misleading information plays a role too, the low-fat diet example.
Oh, definitely. That was held up as a classic case. Decades of promoting low-fat based on arguably flawed science like Ansel Keys' work.
Well, other studies, like the Minnesota one, maybe contradicted it but didn't get traction.
Right, and the result was potentially negative health consequences for millions, driven by this ingrained dogma.
And it connects to how people feel about their own health, right? Blaming themselves.
Yeah, that was a really insightful point. People internalize things like weight gain as personal failure. I'm lazy. I lack willpower.
Instead of seeing the bigger picture, flawed advice, obesogenic environment.
Exactly. Not recognizing the systemic issues that make healthy choices difficult.
So empowering people with knowledge and agency is key. The health core thing they mentioned.
Yeah, that sounded like a concrete initiative. Trying to give young people tools, knowledge, and a sense that their health matters, that they have control.
Like the Peace Corps, but for health education.
That was the parallel drawn, trying to instill that sense of purpose and agency.
But they also said it's hard to engage young people sometimes, this lack of agency.
It is a challenge. They mentioned conflicting messages, maybe societal narratives that paint people as victims, powerless.
Especially young men, maybe.
That was hinted at. And just a general sense of maybe demoralization. Makes it hard to motivate proactive change. The statistic was pretty stark. 43% of youth feeling they have no agency.
Wow. Okay. Shifting gears slightly, but related. Challenges to free speech, open discussion.
Right. One speaker shared an early story, getting huge backlash just for interviewing someone controversial on his show.
From colleagues inside the media world.
Yeah. Indicating this pressure to conform, maybe performative outrage, rather than engaging with the ideas themselves.
And they talked about ad hominem attacks.
Yeah, basically attacking the person instead of their argument. A way to shut down debate without actually dealing with the substance.
If you can't beat the argument, beat the person.
Pretty much. And this led to the idea of common lies versus common truths.
What's the difference there?
It came from someone who experienced totalitarianism. A society based on common truth allows for democracy, trust. A society based on common lies. Everyone knows it's false, but goes along with it.
And the worry is we might be drifting that way, towards stifled, dishonest conversation.
That was the concern raised, yeah. And the speaker detailed his own experiences being targeted.
Like,
Compelled speech issues in Canada, the arsenic thing, GMOs, and then especially COVID-19 discussions. Questioning policies led to intense criticism.
personal and professional costs, basically.
Significant costs, yes. which brought up tenure again. It's supposed to protect academics speaking freely.
But the feeling is maybe it's not working as well anymore.
The concern is that it's eroding. Pressure from administration, ideological conformity, it might be chilling academic speech.
And this led to some strong words about cowardice among professionals.
Yeah, a criticism of people in medicine, academia, other fields who see things they believe are wrong but stay silent.
Out of fear.
Fear of losing their jobs, status, funding, but the argument was it's a failure of professional responsibility.
But maybe there's a turning point. The Alberta vaccine mandate example.
That was presented as a hopeful sign. Enough people pushed back, and the policy changed. It shows collective action can make a difference.
So it's not all bleak, but they definitely warned about public health relying on force and fear.
Yes. The big danger there is destroying trust. If people feel coerced, not informed, they lose faith in public health institutions long term.
Which could be really damaging down the line.
Hugely. Which led into a broader reflection on free speech itself, how amazing and maybe fragile it is.
What did they say made it possible in the West?
A key element, they argued, was some kind of shared belief in a higher order. Something beyond just individual wants.
A foundation for shared values, respect.
Exactly. Something that fosters community and makes open dialogue possible, even with disagreements.
And the worry now is that belief is declining. Replaced by what?
The speaker suggested narratives focused on power, or maybe hedonism, pleasure-seeking.
And why are those dangerous as organizing principles?
Because they can be self-devouring, maybe lacking the element of sacrifice or mutual respect needed for a stable, healthy society.
Which connects to humanism, the value of the individual, that river-stranger thought experiment.
Right. Would you save a stranger or your dog? The traditional Western answer, save the stranger, reflects that inherent value placed on human life.
But maybe that's shifting if some younger people say save the dog.
It raises questions about whether that foundational humanistic value is weakening, which could undermine democracy itself.
And shared stories are crucial for culture, right?
Absolutely. Stories give us common ground, identity, values. So the postmodern idea of no unifying narrative.
They saw that as harmful, pathological even.
Yeah, because it denies a fundamental human need for shared meaning, potentially leading to fragmentation.
The speaker's book was mentioned, exploring old stories.
Yeah, looking at foundational myths, religious stories, for their deep psychological and societal wisdom. How they still speak to us now.
Trying to find that relevant wisdom and the idea of complementarity.
Borrowed from physics and psychology,
Right.
it means seemingly opposite ideas can both hold truth.
So instead of either, it can be both hand. Helps with complex issues.
Exactly. Encourages nuance, seeing value in different perspectives even if they seem contradictory.
And communities need sacrifice. That came up.
Yeah, the idea that living together means giving things up for the common good, which leads to the big question.
What's the highest sacrifice? What should we be willing to give up?
A fundamental question for any society. The Abraham and Isaac story was used as an example.
How so? What was the interpretation?
Not about blind obedience, but about being willing to offer up what you value most. Your highest potential or your children's potential towards a higher purpose without holding back, releasing them to be their best.
Interesting take. Finally, they connected all this back to science itself. Science needs a belief in truth.
The argument was that science is fragile. It relies on people actually believing truth exists and is worth pursuing honestly.
Historically, that belief often came from religion or philosophy, a framework for integrity.
Yes, and without that commitment to truth above ego or reward, science can get corrupted. Bias creeps in.
And the public senses this, the skepticism about censorship or inconsistencies.
That's the idea. People aren't stupid. They see when things don't add up, or when experts seem to contradict themselves or shut down debate.
The personal story about the Hep B vaccine for newborns really hit home.
Yeah, questioning a standard practice, especially one you've participated in, it's psychologically hard to admit it might be flawed.
That inertia, that resistance to reevaluating.
It's powerful.
Yeah?
But it sets the stage for potentially big shifts, a tsunami, as they put it, if enough people start questioning.
And maybe even a political realignment around these issues of health, agency, and truth.
It's definitely a possibility they floated. These issues cut across traditional lines.
Wow. Okay, that was a lot to unpack, but really fascinating. We've covered the media changes allowing these questions.
The real challenge is inside science and health institutions.
The rise of these movements focused on taking back control of health.
And underlying it all, the constant tension around free speech, shared values, and finding truth.
So for you, the listener, hopefully you feel you've got a much richer sense now of all these interconnected forces.
Absolutely. A deeper understanding of what's driving some of these big conversations happening right now.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. In this really complex information age with so much noise, what does real individual responsibility look like for figuring things out and thinking about that idea of sacrifice? What might we collectively and individually need to sacrifice to build a society that's genuinely healthier and maybe a bit more truthful?
Something to ponder. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.